On the programme this week, we ask if it's time, possibly, to take the free out of freelancing. We're going to examine new findings on the South African freelance media landscape. Also, a mini collectibles campaign that encourages children and adults to go outside and spend some quality time together. A new hybrid radio model delivering a massive win for advertisers and harnessing the power of 30,000 runners in an amazing feat for content creation. Well, a very warm welcome, and we're going to start this week with this item. With the gig economy on the rise and freelancers set to become the workforce of the future, it's time, say some, to take the free out of freelancing. This question is being vigorously asked by the South African Freelancers Association as it releases its second annual SA Media Freelance Industry and Rates Report. And there are some disturbing, possibly even shocking findings here. Robin Tikiso is with us, Executive Committee member. A very warm welcome to you, Robin. Thank you. And as I say, some of the trends are worrying, but perhaps just to cater for our broader audience on the channel, when we're talking about freelancers in the media space, who are we talking about?
We're talking about anyone who's from a graphic designer to a photographer, to those in the content development space, so writers and editors and journalists, those in the language studies, interpreting. So it's quite broad. Perhaps
we're talking about whether it's a buyer's or seller's market right now, but give me an overview of the industry right now. Just how tough is it for freelancers?
Well, we know the economy is quite tough, and freelancers are generally independents who've opted to go out on their own for the most part. We do know that there are those who are forced out due to unemployment or retrenchment, but for the most part, people opt to go out for the lifestyle. So it's very difficult. As you said, this is the second report that we've published, and we find from our members in general and from the broader industry that it's tough. And so SAFRIA almost provides a home for those professionals to come into network. It's a resource base. It's not a jobs portal. There are jobs portals out there. But we also just find that some of our members, as they network, actually do find jobs and opportunities through the system, because some clients come through looking for professionals, and then also amongst ourselves, So, for instance, you may find a graphic designer who needs a copywriter.
I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Yes.
You talk about often people leave the traditional industry because they're making a lifestyle choice. So surely they can't complain too much if the risk attached to that decision results in them not being paid enough. In other words, they know what they're getting into, surely.
Sure, and as we can see from the results, we see that the industry is largely female, and as we know that...
Almost 70% female.
Almost 70%. And as we know that the corporate sector is still patriarchal, and so women actually tend to leave because most of them want to write the script themselves, and the pun is actually intended. So you find that environment is not welcoming. So yes, it's an opportunity to go out to explore. We believe that it's an entry into entrepreneurship. These are small businesses.
Why are they not welcome?
I think that's a broader South African discussion. I think that's currently taking place at the moment. Women just want to make their own way. And we know, especially for women as they start having families, that environment is not always welcoming.
Is it a buyer's or seller's market right now, given the tight state of the economy that we're in? I mean, I would suggest to you, and I don't want to answer the question for you, but if you're good, if you have a reputation, there is a constant need for good content. Surely
Correct.
It's a seller's market.
Unfortunately not. And those are the kind of discussions we have on our network forum all the time. And we hear from our members, and from the survey, from the results, we've seen that the buyers are actually setting the market. And that's one of the problems that we find. That's why we find that the rates discussion is just... It's so topical at this point.
Well, you make the point that many rates remain unchanged from 2016 through 2017. I would come back at you and say some of those rates for certain organisations haven't changed in the past 5 or 6 years. So is there a reason for that, or is it simply the freelancers themselves don't know how to negotiate a good deal?
I think it's a bit of both, Jeremy. It really is. And that's why organisations such as SAFRIA are so important, because you'll find a young graduate, can't find employment, has skills, wants to use those, comes into the sector, And they're able to come into an organisation like Safric and find networking, support through a group of highly skilled professionals.
How do they prevent themselves from being exploited, given that a lot of people who are entering the freelance or gig economy profession for the first time are young graduates? They have no experience, for instance, Robin, on how to negotiate. So what's the guiding principle there?
Well, absolutely. So you'll see the report actually speaks to some rates trends, and then it offers some guides. So one of the big questions we always get from our member base is that, how do I charge? How do I charge my services? Because not everybody's writing. We've tracked that, and we can actually see that, for instance, in the advertising sector, most respondents will charge per hour. We see that in the PR and communication space as well. Obviously, when you get into writing and content, I think it's historical that there's a per word rate that's been charged. Personally, I don't think it's a good measure of someone's skill.
Tell me why, because it's always been the per word rate. I mean, again, speaking as a journalist who has dabbled in the past in the freelance space, you will go in and they say, well, I am paying you, X number of rand a word, and then you do the calculation and you end up with under 1,000 rand for a lot of work.
Correct.
Is that model dead?
I would like to see it that way, but it's still very much alive.
So how do you kill it? How do freelancers, in other words, put more pressure on the media owners to change the model?
Well, I think, firstly, we need to gain critical mass. Remember that we don't understand how big this pool is. This pool of freelancers in South Africa, it's an unknown. So
people coming in and going out the whole time.
They come in and they go out, but also we don't have a finite number. It's not tracked. It's not tracked as it is in the United States, for instance. So the idea with this report is actually to just try and go out and start understanding it. And hopefully we'll get to a space where we can actually say we've got 20% of the population is freelancing.
But having said that, I would also suggest to you that freelancers themselves need to take ownership of their own brand value, and they need to become better negotiators.
100%.
How do they do that, though?
Well, freelancers...
Because often they're so happy that they've just got the work. They'll accept because they're trying to put bread on the table.
Correct, correct. And I think it needs to start, we must all understand that we're small businesses. So we may operate as individuals, but we're small businesses and we're brands. And so as we work together, as we network, we can then come together and, move on. And as I said, it's an entry into entrepreneurship.
But the trouble, and I don't think you're going to solve it, Robin, in the short term, is that if someone refuses the job on principle or because they're not being paid enough, I'll tell you right now, there are 500 other people in the queue that will take the job at the rate which is probably not fair. That's the fundamental problem, isn't it?
I can't argue with that, and we see it. We hear it from our members. We've actually seen it from everyone who's responding. That is the current reality. I
am very pleased that we've been able to shine a light on this. Maybe something will change. Not entirely optimistic, though. But anyway, Robin Tekiso, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
This is Mags on Media. Coming up with the programme, why one major supermarket is focusing on harnessing the power of young consumers. And we're going to take a look at what is probably, I think, the most coordinated ad in the history of advertising.